A new video appears to show a U.S. airstrike on an Iranian military base right next to the elementary school where Iranian state media says more than 160 girls were killed. CNN's Isabel Young looks at the video and the evidence that suggests the U.S. may be responsible for that strike on the school.
This is the moment a missile slammed into an Iranian base in Minab, a city in southern Iran, just over a week ago. In this freeze frame, you can see it clearly. Weapons experts tell CNN the wings and tail are consistent with a Tomahawk missile. This new video is the clearest evidence yet that suggests it was the United States that struck an elementary school next to that Revolutionary Guards base, killing scores of students. The US has been firing those Tomahawk missiles at Iran from ships and submarines for more than a week now. Israel doesn't use them, experts tell us.
Mr. President, did the United States bomb a girls' elementary school in southern Iran on the first day of the war and kill 170?
No, in my opinion, based on what I've seen, that was done by Iran.
Is that true, Mr. Hegseth? It was Iran who did that?
We're certainly investigating.
Iran also doesn't use Tomahawk missiles. And using satellite images, it's clear the school was struck nearly simultaneously with strikes on an adjacent Revolutionary Guards base. That suggests precision targeting. CNN geolocated this video. We think this missile struck the military base, not the school. You can see that other buildings in the direction of the school had just been struck when this was filmed. CNN is still trying to gather visual evidence from the ground, and until we see actual remnants from the munitions itself, it's impossible to be definitive. But this is the clearest evidence to date. US Central Command says they're still investigating. Isabel Young, CNN, London.
In response to CNN's findings, a U.S. military spokesperson said it would be inappropriate to comment given the incident is still under investigation.
For more on this, let's bring in U.S. Army retired Lieutenant General Mark Schwartz. He also serves as a CNN military analyst. Thank you so much, General, for joining us. Listen, we know that accidents, tragedies happen in war. No one is accusing the United States, at least no serious person, if the United States was behind the strike, of doing this deliberately or intentionally, but of course that is how Iran is spinning it right now, despite the fact that they themselves have thousands of lives in terms of blood on their hands. But from what you're seeing from Pete Hegseth and how the United States is responding to this thus far, does that bring you or give you any cause for concern? What should be the appropriate response aside from we're conducting investigation?
Well, I think that what is happening now, Central Command is certainly doing, an intensive investigation. I've personally been involved with these of potential civilian casualty, occurring or allegations, and gone through that entire investigative process. It does take some time, and as it was reported right before I came on, we don't have the benefit of actually doing on-the-ground battle damage assessment to look at the shrapnel, and actually assess the type of munition. But, based on what has been put out thus far, and you see the precision fire that came into all those structures around the girls' school, it is consistent with the types of targeting and weaponeering that we do and have done in the past, we being the United States. So I do think it's important, to allow for the investigation process to take place, and as important, the transparency once the investigation is concluded is extremely important. I think the quick response by the president after the dignified transfer ceremony on Air Force One the other day with the secretary in the background, I think the point was being made, hey, we don't deliberately target civilians, and we don't. Certainly it's not part of our rules of engagement in any circumstance. But I do think it's quick to say that it wasn't us. We owe that due diligence that we typically do in the United States military. So I think it's good that we're still looking at this and keeping this, at the forefront, given everything else that's been going on over the course of the last week and I guess about 8 days now since the operations commenced.
So Mark, explain to us, how does a mistake like this, and this is quite a grave mistake, how does a mistake like this actually happen?
Well, part of it is the intelligence that you have in terms of before a target is struck, typically, especially a deliberate target, they have what's called a pattern of life. So you look at the activity that's going on. If you have the ability to, observe it either through satellite still imagery or, full motion video, almost near real time video. So potentially we didn't have that ability, whoever struck this school. But, historically, and certainly in my experience, you have that as you're trying to build up, the level of confidence that the targets that you are striking are in fact viable military targets. But sometimes you don't have perfect intelligence and accidents happen. I personally have approved strikes when I was in service that resulted in the loss of civilian life. And it's tragic, obviously, but the transparency of what occurred and how it occurred and the lessons learned so that ideally you can reduce, you're never going to eliminate, but reduce the likelihood that it could happen again are extremely important.
Let's talk about this with former Defense Secretary and CIA Director under President Obama, Leon Panetta. So thank you so much for being with us, because this is just a heartbreaking story where it appears the U.S. hit this base right next to the school. And you hear the president there blaming Iran. Notably, Hegseth did not confirm that. But the White House press secretary last week cautioned reporters against believing Iranian propaganda. How are you seeing this?
Well, the problem is that when we're engaging and dropping a lot of bombs and air attacks, it's critical that there be accurate and reliable intelligence as to the targets. It appears that there was a serious mistake here, and that instead of hitting a military base, they hit a nearby girls' school. And the problem with that is that, if in fact we're trying to get the Iranian people to be able to rise up and to be able to get a new government, this doesn't help when you hit a girls' school and kill a number of innocent people. Collateral damage is what ultimately hurt our efforts in Afghanistan, because that kind of collateral damage gave impetus to the Taliban to come back. And the danger here is by hitting these kinds of targets, what you're doing is helping the regime stay in place.
Yeah, speaking of Afghanistan, I was thinking back to that 2015 U.S. attack on the Doctors Without Borders hospital in Kunduz. And the story did change initially coming out of the U.S. government. It sort of evolved over the course of a few days before we got a better sense of what was going on. But President Obama ended up personally apologizing a few days later for that strike. Families were paid a compensation. There was an investigation. It was not an independent one, which is what the nonprofit desired. There were military careers that were ended over it, though no one faced a court-martial. And there were a lot of folks who said there should have been more. But there were those steps. And I wonder why you think it's important that an administration take responsibility from the top to the bottom for something like this.
Well, I've often said, truth is the first casualty of war. And that seems to be the case here. It's much better, I believe, when you see what the truth is, for the President of the United States to speak the truth. Because the last thing you need right now in the middle of a war is a president that loses his credibility and speaking to the American people and speaking to the world. And so I believe that it would be far better, because you're dealing with a number of issues here, you're dealing with a number of challenges. If you just simply lie about some mistakes that are being made, that will come back to undermine your leadership. And so the president needs to learn the lessons of war, and obviously he's not.